The lymphatic system, which is also sometimes referred to as your immunity, right? Lymph, your lymphatic vessels, structures containing lymphatic tissue, spleen, thymus, lymph nodes, etc. These are really going to be a filtration system, so they're filtering your body fluids, and they're protecting against disease. They're really kind of helping build your immune system. All right, lymphatic system will have a huge chapter that's discussed upon in Anatomy and Physiology 2, where we really discuss what exactly the lymphatic system is. This is probably the most unfamiliar of the 11 body systems for everyone. So if we look at our lymphatic system, we can see here that there are all these little nodes, right, lymph nodes. Sometimes you may hear about lymph nodes being swollen in your neck, right, where doctor may tell you that he can feel a swollen lymph node. So this is really looking at how these fluids are really being transported throughout your body. Lymphatic system can also often be linked to swelling, edema. So we'll cover that in more depth. The digestive system, which is frequently one of the most well-known systems. All right, we're talking about your GI tract, right? Salivary glands being able to produce saliva so that when you chew, your food can be liquefied. All right, your stomach being able to continue to digest, right? Your intestines being able to remove some of those. So we're talking about physical, right? Physical breakdown, right? Physical breakdown, we're talking about the idea of like chewing versus chemical breakdown, like stomach acid, right? Breaking down these foods. And then, after they're broken down, we obviously need to absorb them. And then, what's left over needs to be eliminated. Like I said, this tends to be a pretty well-known organ system within the human body. So, a picture of our digestive system. All right, we can see the long esophagus as the path that the food is going to travel to get to the stomach, right? We also have the respiratory system, which I've mentioned frequently previous to this when we talked about some of the other systems, specifically talking about cardiovascular respiratory link. The idea that the lungs and the associated airways, the bronchioles and such, where the air actually travels to get to your lungs. So we know that this is the two main goals here, is that we're supplying oxygen, we're eliminating carbon dioxide. But that supplying and eliminating is going to come into that acid-base balance that I talked about in the cardiovascular system, right? The lungs need to be properly transporting those gases in order for the blood to maintain its proper pH. In addition, vocal sounds are produced by the respiratory system because air passing over the vocal cords is what's really going to generate the sound. So, picture of our respiratory system, right? And if we really want to think about it, we should think about the fact that the respiratory system is really going to be like wrapped up in all of these different blood vessels, and they're really going to be surrounding the lungs so that the respiratory system can transport maximum oxygen and the cardiovascular system can eliminate maximum CO2. So those two really do play a huge role together. The urinary system, right? Kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder. The idea of being able to regulate the volume of the blood, right? So making sure that if blood volume starts to decrease, that your body is retaining some of its liquid in order to build up blood volume, versus if blood volume is starting to increase, you can release some of that blood volume by eliminating liquids from your body. Eliminating waste, that would be our urine, would be that waste. Electrolyte balance, acid-base balance. There's so many different things that are released within urine, and urine is really going to be a liquid that has different components depending on the needs of the human body. I know it may sound silly, but the easiest way to think about this is thinking about the color of your urine throughout the day. and how it goes from dark colors to lighter shades, depending on the liquids that you're consuming and depending on the needs of your body. If you're really having dark urine, that means that your body is maintaining a lot of that liquid that you're consuming and not releasing as much, which means you need liquid. Perhaps you're slightly dehydrated. Versus if your urine is very light in color, it means that your body has the liquid that it needs, so it's getting rid of excess liquid and it's diluting your urine for that lighter color, right? So urinary system really does play a huge regulation role in the human body. All right, we can look at it and see our big structures there being the kidneys and the bladder. And then our reproductive system being our last system that we're going to talk about. Testes, ovaries, fallopian tubes. And I think it's pretty straightforward when we talk about the reproductive system that the purpose of the reproductive system is to reproduce, to make new organisms, right? The fact that the organization of that particular system and all the organs within its system lead to the ability of humans to reproduce. So we can look and see that male versus female reproductive systems have significant differences. So that pretty much wraps it up for our general overview of organ systems, the body systems in the human body. And like I said, we will be covering each of these systems in substantially more detail as we progress throughout Anatomy and Physiology 1 and 2.